Foreign relations of the French Republic are the French government's external relations with the outside world. Located in Western Europe, France is a major European country that has played a prominent and historic role in the European and international history since medieval times. France is a founding member of the United Nations, of NATO, and of the European Coal and Steel Community. Its main allies are the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, the United States, the other NATO countries, and the European Union. As a charter member of the United Nations, France holds one of the permanent seats in the Security Council and is a member of most of its specialized and related agencies. France is also a founding member of the Union for the Mediterranean and the La Francophonie and plays a key role, both in regional and in international affairs. Napoleon. Prussia joined Britain and Russia, thus forming the Fourth Coalition. Although the coalition was joined by other allies, the French Empire was also not alone, since it now had a complex network of allies and subject states. There the Russian Empire was defeated at the Battle of Friedland. Peace was dictated in the treaties of Tilsit, in which Russia had to join the continental system, and Prussia handed half of its territories to France. The Duchy of Warsaw was formed over these territorial losses, and Polish troops entered the Grande Armée Acute in significant numbers. Freed from his obligation in the east, Napoleon then went back to the west, as the French Empire was still at war with Britain. Only two countries remained neutral in the war, Sweden and Portugal, and Napoleon then looked toward the latter. In the Treaty of Fontainebleau, a Franco-Spanish alliance against Portugal was sealed as Spain eyed Portuguese territories. French armies entered Spain in order to attack Portugal, but then seized Spanish fortresses and took over the kingdom by surprise. Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, was made King of Spain after Charles IV abdicated. This occupation of the Iberian Peninsula fueled local nationalism, and soon the Spanish and Portuguese fought the French using guerrilla tactics, defeating the French forces at the Battle of Belen. Britain sent a short-lived ground support force to Portugal, and French forces evacuated Portugal as defined in the Convention of Sintra following the Allied victory at Vimeiro. France only controlled Catalonia and Navarre and could have been definitely expelled from the Iberian Peninsula had the Spanish armies attacked again, but the Spanish did not. Another French attack was launched on Spain, led by Napoleon himself, and was described as an avalanche of fire and steel. However, the French Empire was no longer regarded as invincible by European powers. In 1808 Austria formed the War of the Fifth Coalition in order to break down the French Empire. The Austrian Empire defeated the French at Essbar and Essling, yet was beaten at Wagram, while the Polish allies defeated the Austrian Empire at Rasin. Although not as decisive as the previous Austrian defeats, the peace treaty in October 1809 stripped Austria of a large amount of territories, reducing it even more. In 1812 Napoleon could no longer tolerate Russian independence. He assembled a gigantic army and invaded. The French invasion of Russia was a total disaster, caused primarily by weather, partisan attacks, disease and inadequate logistics. Only small remnants of the invading army returned from Russia. On the Spanish front, the French armies were defeated and evacuated Spain. Since France had been defeated on these two fronts, states it previously conquered and controlled struck back. The Sixth Coalition was formed, and the German states of the Confederation of the Rhine switched sides, finally opposing Napoleon. Napoleon was defeated in the Battle of the Nations outside Leipzig in October 1813. The Allies invaded France and Napoleon abdicated on 6 April 1814. The Conservative Congress of Vienna reversed the political changes that had occurred during the wars. Napoleon's attempted restoration, a period known as the 100 Days, ended with his final defeat of the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. The monarchy was restored with Louis XVIII as king, followed by his brother. France was soon integrated into the reactionary international situation. However, much of the Napoleonic liberalization of Western Europe, including Italy, and Germany, and adjacent areas became permanent Second Empire. 1851–1871. Despite his promises in 1852 of a peaceful reign, Napoleon III could not resist the temptations of glory in foreign affairs. He was visionary, mysterious and secretive, he had a poor staff, and kept running afoul of his domestic supporters. In the end he was incompetent as a diplomat. Napoleon did have some successes. He strengthened French control over Algeria, established bases in Africa, began the takeover of Indochina, and opened trade with China. He facilitated a French company building the Suez Canal, which Britain could not stop. In Europe, however, Napoleon failed again and again. The Crimean War of 1854–1856 produced no gains. War with Austria in 1859 facilitated the unification of Italy, and Napoleon was rewarded with the annexation of Savoy and Nice. The British grew annoyed at his intervention in Syria in 1860–61. He angered Catholics alarmed at his poor treatment of the Pope, then reversed himself and angered the anti-clerical liberals at home and his erstwhile Italian allies. He lowered the tariffs, which helped in the long run but in the short run angered owners of large estates and the textile and iron industrialists, while leading worried workers to organize. Matters grew worse in the 1860s as Napoleon nearly blundered into war with the United States in 1862, while his Mexican intervention in 1861–1867 was a total disaster. Finally, in the end, he went to war with the Germans in 1870 when it was too late to stop German unification. Napoleon had alienated everyone. After failing to obtain an alliance with Austria and Italy, France had no allies and was bitterly divided at home. It was disastrously defeated on the battlefield, losing Alsace and Lorraine. A.J.P. Taylor is blunt. He ruined France as a great power. Third Republic, 1871–1914. French foreign policy was based on a fear of Germany, whose larger size and fast-growing economy could not be matched, combined with a revanchism that demanded the return of Alsace and Lorraine. At the same time, imperialism was a factor. In the midst of the scramble for Africa, French and British interest in Africa came into conflict. The most dangerous episode was the Fischoeder Incident of 1898 when French troops tried to claim an area in the southern Sudan, and a British force purporting to be acting in the interests of the Khedive of Egypt arrived. Under heavy pressure, the French withdrew, securing Anglo-Egyptian control over the area. The status quo was recognized by an agreement between the two states acknowledging British control over Egypt, while France became the dominant power in Morocco, but France suffered a humiliating defeat overall. The Suez Canal, initially built by the French, became a joint British-French project in 1875, as both saw it as vital to maintaining their influence and empires in Asia. In 1882, ongoing civil disturbances in Egypt prompted Britain to intervene, extending a hand to France. The government allowed Britain to take effective control of Egypt. France had colonies in Asia and looked for alliances and found in Japan a possible ally. At Japan's request, Paris sent military missions in 1872–1880, in 1884–1889, and in 1918–1919 to help modernize the Japanese army. Conflicts with China over Indochina climaxed during the Sino-French War. Admiral Courbet destroyed the Chinese fleet anchored at Foochow. The treaty ending the war put France in a protectorate over northern and central Vietnam, which it divided into Tonkin and Annam. In an effort to isolate Germany, France went to great pains to woo Russia and Great Britain, first by means of the Franco-Russian alliance of 1894, then the 1904 Entente Cordiale with Great Britain, and finally the Anglo-Russian Entente in 1907, which became the Triple Entente. This alliance with Britain and Russia against Germany and Austria eventually led Russia and Britain to enter World War I as France's allies. Under the leadership of expansionist Jules Ferry, the Third Republic greatly expanded the French colonial empire. Catholic missionaries played a major role. France acquired Indochina, Madagascar, vast territories in West Africa and Central Africa, and much of Polynesia. Third Republic, 1914 to 1940. French foreign policy was based on an alliance with Russia, and an informal understanding with Britain, all based on the assumption that the main threat was from Germany. The crisis of 1914 was unexpected, and when Germany mobilized its forces in response to Russian mobilization, France also had to mobilize. Germany then invaded Belgium and France, and the World War I had begun. France suffered very heavy losses, in terms of battle casualties and economic distress, but came out on the winning side. At the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, vengeance against defeated Germany was the main French theme, and Prime Minister Clemenceau was largely effective against the moderating influences of the British and Americans. Vichy regime, 1940–44. The fall of France in June 1940 brought a new regime known as Vichy France. Theoretically it was neutral, and maintained formal relationships with the United States. It was heavily influenced by Germany until November 1942, when Germany took full control. Vichy was intensely conservative and anti-communist. But independent action was impossible with Germany controlling half of France directly and holding nearly 2 million French POWs as hostages. Vichy finally collapsed when the Germans fled in summer 1944. Fourth Republic. The creation of the European Coal and Steel Community was first proposed by French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman and French economic theorist Jean Monnet on 9 May 1950 as a way to prevent further war between France and Germany. Though the UK was invited, its Labour government, then preparing for a re-election fight, did not join the initiative. ECSC was formally established in 1951 by the Treaty of Paris, signed by France, Italy, West Germany and the three Benelux states, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. Among these states the ECSC would remove trade barriers and create a common market for coal and steel. The ECSC was governed by a high authority, checked by bodies representing governments, members of parliament and an independent judiciary. Pierre Mendès France was a Radical Party leader and the Prime Minister for 8 months in 1954–55, working with the support of the Socialist and Communist parties. His top priority was ending the war in Indochina, which had already cost 92,000 dead, 114,000 wounded and 28,000 captured. Public opinion polls show that in February 1954, only 7% of the French people wanted to continue the fight to keep Indochina out of the hands of the Communists, led by Ho Chi Minh and his Viet Minh movement. At the Geneva Conference he made a deal that gave the Viet Minh control of Vietnam north of the 17th parallel, and allowed him to pull out all French forces. That left South Vietnam standing alone. However, the United States moved in and provided large-scale financial, military and economic support for South Vietnam. Mendès France next came to an agreement with Habib Bourguiba, the nationalist leader in Tunisia, for the independence of that colony by 1956, and began discussions with the nationalist leaders in Morocco for a French withdrawal. Fifth Republic. President de Gaulle, 1958–1969. The May 1958 seizure of power in Algiers by French army units and French settlers opposed to concessions in the face of Arab nationalist insurrection ripped apart the unstable Fourth Republic. The National Assembly brought him back to power during the May 1958 crisis. De Gaulle founded the Fifth Republic with a strengthened presidency, and he was elected in the latter role. He managed to keep France together while taking steps to end the war, much to the anger of the Pieds-Noirs and the military. Both previously had supported his return to power to maintain colonial rule. He granted independence to Algeria in 1962 and progressively to other French colonies. Proclaiming that grandeur was the essential to the nature of France, de Gaulle initiated his politics of grandeur. He demanded complete autonomy for France in world affairs, which meant that it has its major decisions which could not be forced upon it by NATO, the European Community or anyone else. De Gaulle pursued a policy of national independence. He twice vetoed Britain's entry into the common market, fearing it might overshadow France in European affairs. While not officially abandoning NATO, he withdrew from its military integrated command, fearing that the United States had too much control over NATO. He launched an independent nuclear development program that made France the fourth nuclear power. He restored cordial Franco-German relations in order to create a European counterweight between the Anglo-Saxon and Soviet spheres of influence. De Gaulle openly criticized the U.S. intervention in Vietnam. He was angry at American economic power, especially what his finance minister called the exorbitant privilege of the U.S. dollar. He went to Canada and proclaimed Vive le Québec libre, the catchphrase for an independent Quebec. De Gaulle resigned in 1969 after losing a referendum in which he proposed more decentralization. Francois Mitterrand, 1981–1995. Francois Mitterrand, a socialist, emphasized European unity and the preservation of France's special relationships with its former colonies in the face of Anglo-Saxon influence. A part of the enacted policies was formulated in the Socialist Party's 110 propositions for France, the electoral program for the 1981 presidential election. He had a warm and effective relationship with the conservative German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. They promoted French-German bilateralism in Europe and strengthened military cooperation between the two countries. Jacques Chirac. Nicolas Sarkozy. Shortly after taking office, President Sarkozy began negotiations with Colombian President Alvaro Uribe and the left-wing guerrilla FARC, regarding the release of hostages held by the rebel group, especially Franco-Colombian politician Ingrid Betancourt. According to some sources, Sarkozy himself asked for Uribe to release FARC's Chancellor, Rodrigo Granda. Furthermore, he announced on 24 July 2007, that French and European representatives had obtained the extradition of the Bulgarian nurses detained in Libya to their country. In exchange, he signed with Gaddafi security, healthcare and immigration pacts, and a $230 million Milan anti-tank missile sale. The contract was the first made by Libya since 2004, and was negotiated with MBDA, a subsidiary of EADS. Another €128 million contract would have been signed, according to Tripoli, with the ADS for a Tetra radio system. The Socialist Party and the Communist Party criticized a state affair and a barter with a rogue state. The leader of the PS, Francois Hollande, requested the opening of a parliamentary investigation. On 8 June 2007, during the 33rd G8 summit in Haile-Gandam, Sarkozy set a goal of reducing French CO2 emissions by 50% by 2050 in order to prevent global warming. He then pushed forward the important socialist figure of Dominique Strauss-Kahn as European nominee to the International Monetary Fund. Critics alleged that Sarkozy proposed to nominate Strauss-Kahn as managing director of the IMF to deprive the Socialist Party of one of its more popular figures. Sarkozy normalized what had been strained relations with NATO. In 2009, France again was a fully integrated NATO member. Francois Hollande has continued the same policy. Francois Hollande Socialist Francois Hollande won election in 2012 as president. He adopted a generally hawkish foreign policy, in close collaboration with Germany in regard to opposing Russian moves against Ukraine, and in sending the military to fight radical Islamicists in Africa. He takes a hard line with regard to the Greek debt crisis. Francois Hollande launched 2 military operations in Africa, Operation Serval in Mali, and Operation Sangarış. France was also the first European nation to join the United States in bombing the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant. Under President Hollande, France's stances on the civil war in Syria and Iran's nuclear program has been described as hawkish. International Organization Participation, ACCT, AFDB, ASDB, Australia Group, BDEAC, BIS, CCC, CDB, CE, CERN, EAPC, EBRD, ECA, ECE, ECLAC, EIB, EMU, ESA, ESCAP, EU, FAO, FZ, G5, G7, G10, IADB, IAEA, IBRD, ICAO, ICC, ICC, ICRM, IDA, IEA, IFAD, IFC, IFRCS, IHO, ILO, IMF, International Maritime Organization, Inmarsat, INOC, Intelsat, Interpol, IOC, IOM, ISO, ITU, ITUC, MINURSO, MIPONUH, MONUC, NAM, NATO, NE, NSG, OAS, OECD, OPCW, OSCE, PCA, SPC, UN, UN Security Council, UNCTAD, UNESCO, UNHCR, UNIDO, UNIFIL, UNIKOM, UNITAR, UNMIBH, UNMIK, UNOMIG, UNRWA, UNTSO, UNU, UPU, WADB, WEU, WFTU, WHO, WIPO, WMO, WTOO, WTRO. Zanga Committee International Border Disputes. Madagascar claims Bass's Dar India, Europa Island, Glorioso Islands and Wanda Nova Island. Comoros claims Mayotte. Mauritius claims Tromelin Island. Seychelles claims the Glorioso Islands. Territorial dispute between Suriname and French Guiana. Territorial claim in Antarctica. Matthew and Hunter Islands east of New Caledonia claimed by France and Vanuatu. Europe. France has maintained its status as key power in Western Europe because of its size, location, strong economy, membership in European organizations, strong military posture, and energetic diplomacy. France generally has worked to strengthen the global economic and political influence of the EU and its role in common European defence and collective security. France supports the development of a European security and defence identity as the foundation of efforts to enhance security in the European Union. France cooperates closely with Germany and Spain in this endeavour.